Y'all ain't heard nothing like this before. Beat him in the head with this trilogy. Who dropped this for a certain demographic? Turn it up, blast it. This is gonna be a classic. Facts. Not to run it.
Hey, good evening, Gumas, Paisans. I'm Bobby Bacala.
I'm Shirtless Mike.
If you guys caught it, we did a roast on Mike's birthday last Saturday. It was a blast. Mike took a lot of shit. Took it like a man. You did.
A lot.
Took it like a man. My big 3 minutes of stand-up debut, off the cuff, nothing written. It was a great time. I did have the pleasure, though, to meet some of Mike's family, which was really nice. It's nice to get to know Mike a little better that way. So I'm hoping you guys seen it. If you didn't see it, look at Mike's page.
Team Shirtless Mike on YouTube. I was going to upload it here, which I still probably will.
Yeah.
But when I said that, I was like kind of drunk.
Yeah,
and
do that.
It's been hella busy, but it's got a lot of views over there. So Team Shirtless Mike, and you can
and then hopefully I can
out.
get Mike to upload it. So tonight's going to be interesting. Before I get into exactly what it's going to be about, 23 years ago, in the course of my duties in law enforcement, I had a unfortunate incident, or incident, whoever you want to call it, on an investigation, where somebody ended up, as a result, getting 18 years in prison. We reconnected, and I'm not going to tell you the story right now because it's a pretty interesting story on how we reconnected. Gator is good enough to come on and share some of his stuff. We're not going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're going to keep some things out. But I think you guys are going to find it interesting. I think you're going to find it interesting just at the standpoint of, you look at good guys, bad guys, and cops and guys in jail, and then you say, these guys will never build a friendship. They're going to fucking hate each other. They hate each other to begin with. Thank you, Tara. And that's not the case. So we're going to talk about that a little bit too. Before we go any further with cigars and everything else, let's thank our sponsors, Smoke Rings. Thank you, Lou.
Yep. And we're located at 925 North Courtney Parkway here in Merritt Island, Florida. I'm here all the damn time, so you'll definitely see me if you come on the right days. Mike's always pimping sticks here, but Wednesday nights, man, if you guys aren't doing anything, you want to come in, sit down, watch the podcast, and shoot the shit afterwards. We're here every Wednesday night, unless we're doing a remote. I'd like to thank Steve Sage, Bully Tattoos, DeBerry, Florida. Tommy Law with Rock and Roll Circus in St. Augustine. Thank you all for being supporters of the show. Thanks for being sponsors. We couldn't do it without our sponsors and our fans. That being said, what are we smoking tonight, my friend? Tonight we're smoking on the My Father, Connecticut. So it's My Father, Connecticut. Excellent Connecticut. I'm about to light it up real quick. I haven't lit mine up yet. And I chose this Connecticut because, number one, you can't smoke anything too strong. But this is a Connecticut that has a little bit of a kick to it for a Connecticut, meaning it's very flavorful. So you don't always feel like you're smoking a Connecticut. If you smoke this first cigar of the day, then you're going to definitely, if you want a little bit more of a kick, but not like a ass kicker, this is a perfect cigar.
So the MC of Mike's Roast is Tony Nardone, the owner of Executive Cigars in Melbourne, Florida. Tony actually, and I've said this I think on the first episode, is the one who taught me about cigars, got me into cigars. And this is like one of the first cigars that he turned me on to, was My Father's line. And I've always been faithful to the Don Pepin and My Father's line for years. Naturally, I branched off to some other smokes, but haven't had My Father in probably a year. So when Mike said this was going to be the choice for the evening, I was like, cool, bring me back a little bit. What do we got, Mike?
So I'm getting like a lot of nuttiness at first when I'm just puffing on this. It's got some creaminess, but the creaminess is kind of in the background for me. Just the more you smoke, and I've smoked several cigars today, some stronger cigars prior to this, so I'm not really feeling the kick. If I was to smoke this first thing in the morning, it would give me that kick. with some coffee. But it's a very flavorful Connecticut. You don't feel like you're smoking air when you're smoking this.
It has a little bite for Connecticut, though. I mean, it's not your normal Connecticut that doesn't have a pack full of flavor and
get a little bit of molasses, not a whole lot, but just a little bit. I did a little retrohale,
and their signature little bit of pepper in there. I mean, with
very little bit of pepper on there.
Right, not as much as some of their others, but you can definitely taste the pepper in here.
Yeah, but it's not super peppery, but it's very. I love pepper. That's one thing I love in a cigar, pepper. And this has that. So I mean,
oh no, it definitely has some. Said it's been a while. It's been a year since I smoked one, so it comes right back. I can absolutely tell when you're smoking on My Father. You can tell you're smoking on My Father.
Yeah.
They do have a distinct taste and flavor to them, and like always, that little bit of pepper, even though it's not heavy pepper like their other cigars. But the Maduro always used to be my favorite. The anniversaries I used to smoke them a lot. But definitely a good cigar, man. Good choice, Mike.
Yes, most definitely. I'm definitely enjoying this cigar. We've expanded our My Father line here at Smoke Ring 72, so it's definitely, we have 3 different boxes, 3 different sizes. So
what's new in the house, though, man? I've seen that you guys restocked on some monsters and
we got some Tatuaje. We got the Mummy, the Frank. I bought the last 2 of the Jekylls because
that's what we smoked, right?
We smoked the Jekyll before. I bought the last 2 because I had to make some room on the shelf, and there was just 2. Somebody threw it. Took the box away, so I was like, "Well, I'm gonna buy this." Smoked it yesterday, but we expanded the My Father line. It's pretty much the newest thing. So we got like My Father the Judge, La Opulencia.
Remember the Judge? Yep.
Which I reviewed the Judge today for the shop, so that'll be up probably by tomorrow because I got feedback on the review and I just got to send it out. It's been a busy day somewhat. But that's, we're going to have a 2-year anniversary March 11th. So not this Saturday, but the following Saturday. So feature on My Father's Cigars. And we're doing just until the event, we're doing 20% off boxes as a pre-sale. So if you can't make it, come in and buy a box. You get 20% off. And
good.
And get whatever you need.
Remember as well at Rock and Roll Circus in St. Augustine, not only is it a cool bar and a cool clothing shop, they're carrying the Hitman cigars and my new line of the Hitman, which is rum and CBD oil infused. They're going to be the only ones carrying that right now. If you're interested still, you still have the other Hitman line. You can always hit us up if you're interested in the Hitman. And the CBD, I'll be more than happy to send those out as well. But as far as being sold, they're exclusive to Rock and Roll Circus. All right. Let's get into this. 23 years ago, there was an incident where I met our first guest. He wasn't on the radar. He wasn't on, law enforcement's radar for anything until this untimely event that occurred. We're going to touch on some things. I don't want to dwell on the past. Gator did his 18 years like a man, came out, and I'm going to talk about our meeting since then and my feelings about the person that Gator is today. So without further ado, Gator, come hang out with us, you big bastard.
Mike, Bobby, thank you guys for having me tonight on the podcast.
No, man, thanks for coming on. It's a pleasure.
I'm local, born and raised here. Bobby and I have a past. We were mutual acquaintances with our respective jobs back in the days. And I had an altercation with one of the local municipalities, and Bobby was working in internal affairs at the time as OIC. I ended up getting 18 years in prison. I was on a lot of medications. I was on too many medications prescribed by a doctor. One of them was gabapentin. Two of them were SSRI antidepressants. Um, like I said, I ended up going to prison for 18 years. I just came home in 2018. I started frequenting smoke rings again, hooked up with Shirtless Mike.
All right, let me stop you a minute, just so we can back up, and then
What's up?
they can move forward.
Okay.
So yes, you did 18 years. The incident that Gator is talking about, he was involved in a officer-related shooting. As a result, the judge gave him 18 years. He did his 18 years. We're going to talk about that as well, but not to sugarcoat anything. And, you know, we're going to get into that. It was an officer-involved shooting. So now, 2018, Gator does his time. He gets out. Before we even get into that, let me say and preface this that Gator is a 100% disabled veteran. He did his time for the government as well prior to that night. So he gets out, been out since 18. I'm going to take it up to the point and have Gator tell you how we reconnected. And then we're sort of going to, like a puzzle, I'm going to ask him certain questions and we're going to talk about certain things. But let him get us to this point. I do want to talk about the medications that he was on because I have your cigar right in my nose, but don't worry about it. We do have a connection on one of the medications. I do want to talk about that as well. But so how did we reconnect, Gator?
Well, when I got home in 2018, I started frequenting smoke rings again. Beginning of 2019, I met Shirtless Mike here. He was a new employee. We started hanging out.
That was 2021. That started here.
Was it?
Yeah.
You weren't over at the old shop?
No, I've only worked
Okay,
here.
my bad.
It's okay.
So Mike started apparently in 2021. So we started chopping it up, and I realized that one of his acquaintances, Bobby, I recognized the name from back in 2001. And me and Mike chopped it up a little bit about it. And he was kind of basically a liaison between me and Bobby. Well, as you know, Shirtless Mike just had his birthday bash this last Saturday night here at Smoke Rings. And Bobby shows up. So in order to break the ice, I sent over a couple drinks for him and his wife. They came over, we chopped it up a minute. Bobby's like, hey, let's grab coffee one morning. I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. So Monday, we went to a coffee shop in the area and chopped it up for about an hour and a half. We talked about some things. Medications is another connection. The gabapentin, also better known as Neurontin, was one of the medications I was on, along with SSRI antidepressants. The incident happened for numerous reasons. One, me screwing up because I didn't take the responsibility of owning firearms. And two, I should have stopped and questioned the medications I was on. I should have never had the firearms in the house when I was on that many medications that were prescribed by a physician. So we're going to jump back to Saturday night. Mike hooked us up. Me and Bobby chopped it up. We had coffee Monday morning. We went over some things about the case, and after talking, we both agreed there were certain things that didn't set right with either of us. So, like Bobby said, I did 18 years. The first institute I was at, I got into academics and then into vocational, and I became an institutional teacher's assistant at this institute for several years. And then I ended up getting transferred later on to various institutes around the state of Florida. Came home. Like I said, we started frequent smoke rings again, and I reconnected with Bobby over something as simple as coffee and cigars here at Smoke Rings.
Which is cool because, you know, you think about it, and life throws you curveballs, and life puts people either in your path for a reason or takes people out of your path for a reason. Now, 23 years ago, and having the nickname that I have is Hardcore, I would have told you unequivocally, by no certain means, would I be sitting here with a fucking guy who did 18 years in prison. You live and learn through life, and I think it's, maybe as I mellowed, as I got older, and so when I reconnected with Gator and we started talking, I'm like, man, I'm retired for a while. The guy seems to have turned his life around. Fuck, let's grab coffee. Let's talk about. We have a close mutual friend still together. So we started talking about old times and shit like that and how things went wrong. And unfortunately, Gator lost his wife while he was gone. She passed. And so it's more than just being locked up for 18 years and having your life taken away, but also had the love of his life taken away. So I know that's taking a toll. He's going through some stuff now as far as making sure that he's on the right path. But I guess what I'm getting to is that life does definitely put people with each other for a reason. Whatever that reason is, you guys know my story about coding and the experience I had, and I don't know if this is something that is supposed to be, but it's very interesting to me only because I would have never seen myself in this position. Now, Gator brings up gabapentin, and I had mentioned that that's a connection that him and I have. So I've been on gabapentin. I've got lower lumbar fusion, got pins and rods in my back and shit. So I have neuropathy in my legs. So the doctors, to try to calm your leg down at night, your legs down, because it gets so frustrating, you won't be able to sleep. Your legs jump, they go numb. Gabapentin, which was used for epilepsy, was also prescribed for this syndrome. The problem is, if you're taking too many a day, your clouds your short-term memory, and it puts you in a somewhat of a haze. Now, I'm telling you this not because I spoke to Gator. I'm telling you this because I'm no longer on this medication, because I was getting very forgetful. My wife had to write stuff down for me. It was always a joke that I couldn't remember one thing from the next. So it's been a month since I went off of this. And it's been like night and day. And yes, sometimes at night, you walk through the house, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So at that point, I can relate to Gator on the gabapentin because I was on it. And unfortunately, I was one of the ones that fell victim to the side effects of gabapentin. That about sum it up?
Yeah, it does, Bobby. Like Bobby said, I never thought I'd be sitting here with an ex-law enforcement officer that actually law enforcement officers that saved my life. Like I said, I was on several prescription medications, gabapentin being one, and two of the SSRI antidepressants that are now known to cause homicidal and suicidal ideation. I don't know if you remember back in 2005, the young man that flew the plane into the building in Tampa.
In Tampa, I do.
He was on gabapentin along with a couple other medications. Doing 18 years, you have a lot of time to reflect and scrutinize on things. And to look back at it, like I said, I'm actually grateful for the officers because they actually saved my life. I still have some resentment toward the attorney that I ended up with and the courts, but I'll eventually move on, get over that, And like Bobby said, I lost my wife recently, about 2 years ago. I'm back in a GDP program for vets in the area. I'm planning on moving up the title or moving out west to be with my stepson and the family out there and the grandkids. My great niece went out there over the holidays to surprise them. But it's an issue that we still face today with these medications. Me being a vet, being service connected, the VA is still pushing medications on the veterans. And I see that as one of the main problems why we have an average of 22 veterans a day taking their lives. That and the BS and the red tape and the hoops you have to jump through dealing with the VA trying to file your claim. It took me 28 years dealing with the VA. But like Bobby said, I finally got the compensation that I should have gotten from the get-go with my service-connected injury. And it's just, it's been a life-changing experience for me, doing 18 years in prison. I went to prison. Ended up educating myself twofold. One, academically, got into vocational. I did small gas engines, did cabinet shop, and at one point, I did independent studies through the University of California of Sacramento in wastewater. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get my water because I only had about 7 or 8 months left before I got released.
So what kind of jobs did you do while you were in prison?
Oh, basically, like I said, the first institute I was at, I was an institutional teacher's assistant for one of the civilians that worked at the institute for several years. The guys wanted to get into wastewater, and the first thing I asked them was, "Hey, you got a high school diploma?" And they're like, "No, that's a requirement to get into wastewater." And like I said, I was affiliated with all the gangs in prison, and I earned a lot of respect because it didn't matter who you were affiliated with. I was helping these guys to better themselves in prison, regardless of their sentence, whether they had a 3-year sentence or they had 2 life sentences, to better yourself in prison.
Right. So, we spoke, and again, majority of people see prison portrayed either, in a movie or on TV or something like that, and I don't think that a lot of them get the gist on. Now, some facilities are worse than the others. Some
Correct,
are not.
yes.
Some federal facilities have golf courses. If people don't believe that, I'm here to tell you it is the truth.
England Air Force Base up in the Panhandle is on a base, and they are allowed to use the base amenities, get a job, and the only thing they have to do is show up for their counts.
Wow.
And that's it.
I've heard about that place.
Yep. So
I know a guy who was low level and he was there.
up in England.
Yeah.
And for those that are wondering, like I said earlier in the podcast, me and Bobby had a past through our previous and respective jobs. Bobby was in law enforcement. I was an extradition specialist slash agent for the private corporation out of Tennessee. I transported prisoners pretty much all over Florida.
I remember that, brother.
That's how I got to know
I remember that.
the local municipality. One of the other guys that Bobby worked with, I went to school back in 86 and 87 with. He was a Catholic boy, turned long-haired hippie, so a big shout out to you, Mikey. So
We do love Mike.
oh yeah.
Not that we did
gotta
any
get together and chop it
We
up
are
some
not that
Mike.
we did any drinking
We'll hit
together,
Buc-ee's
but
and have a couple oysters and a few drinks. So
you did some confinement time we spoke about.
yeah, confinement is basically known as the box. You get a DR or an infraction, you get in trouble, you go back there for 30 to 60 days. They also have what's known as close management. We call it the slab. It's basically the box, but long term. Back in 2012, the Florida Department of Corrections had taken several of the medications off their formulary, and one of them was one of the medications I was on, and they put me on. I'm not sure if it was Depakote or Depakine, but that was also another medication for epilepsy. And I was on about 3,000 milligrams of that, and I ended up having an altercation when I was incarcerated. They tried to slap me with another 15 years for assault battery on a Leo. I got transferred to another institute, to a transitional crisis unit. Got transferred up to Butler County, to one of the institutes up there, and then I got shipped out west to one of the CM camps for about 18 months. Did my time, got out, got transferred to another institute. I wasn't even out 4 or 5 months, and I got jammed up with a setup because I wouldn't snitch on somebody that I had an altercation with.
So what happens when you snitch on somebody? And
Snitches get stitches, bro. You know, you got two choices. You
I
either
hear
get
you.
stitches, or you're checking in, and they either protect the custody or protect the management.
I gotta respect you about the whole snitch. We did an episode on snitches, so I gotta respect you for that. At least you didn't dime anybody else out on it.
Oh, it's funny, when I got released, long story short, the officer that was taking me to the bus station to put me on the bus, we're sitting in medical, and he pulls out a shank that's probably a good 14, 16 inches long, and has the audacity to ask me, do you know where any more of these were? And I said, I should just crash you on GP for trying me like that and disrespecting me. I said, I didn't make you get into the field, into the corrections, you know. I said, I've been down 18 years, I never snitch and never will snitch. So it's funny because, you know, you hang out with the police in prison, you kiki with them, and everybody thinks you're snitching. That's why I really didn't have any affiliation. I worked with a couple of decent officers, you know, with a couple of jobs that I had, like inside grounds. The officer I worked for was real cool. She's like, look, you got medical issues. She goes, go hang out on the rec yard. Don't get in any trouble. She goes, I'm going to need you from time to time to do some things like when we have a big inspection. And I'm like, that's cool. So, you know, I use my time constructively to better myself. So when I got out, I could handle some of the challenges that I would be facing. When I did get out in 2018, I was staying with my wife at the time for about 2 weeks. There was a young man that was supposed to be taking care of her. We got into an altercation. He had called the police and had me thrown out of the house. So I was on the street probably about 4 weeks, 5 weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas in 2018. Really didn't want any help from the VA, but I ended up in the GPD program in the area, which I'm back in. So, like I said, I'll start stacking my money. After 2 years, I got some dental work I got to get done through the VA, and then after 2 years, I'm going to move out west to be with my stepson, be hanging out with the grandkids, you know. But I mean, it's a life-changing experience from prison. You know, some institutes are sweeter than others, and then there's some where you're having to bump several times a week. And by what I mean by bumping is fight, throwing hands. Because people are going to try you, they're going to disrespect you. So,
did you make any good hooch?
No, I had a friend that had some for one of my birthdays, and man, I had about 3 tumblers of that stuff, man, and I was like, yeah, this shit is straight, you know.
All from, what do they make that with? Fruit from?
They get various ingredients from the chow hall, you know, by various means. And this one guy my neighbor had gotten a couple of tumblers from was consistent with his ingredients, and it almost tasted like a damn screwdriver. Seriously, it was that good. I wanted to go back and buy him a couple more cups. He went back and it's like, man, I just sold the last 2 coffee bags I had of it. But like I said, I had about 3 tumblers of that, and we were feeling good. So,
well, I'm sure that other inmates were getting party favors brought in, and so that was prevalent, right?
Oh yeah, the contraband. Some of these camps, the institutes I was at were flooded. You get up into the Panhandle, and it's pretty dry up there. You know, there was some stuff trickling in, but you know, the institutes from like Central Florida down, they were pretty sweet. So, you know, I hung out for a while, had a good time.
Well,
stayed off the radar with the police. So
I mean, you could pretty much get anything, right?
Money talks, bullshit walks.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And the one institute I was at was wide open. I'd gotten transferred to an institute down south. Somehow I ended up in a tier 1, tier 2 drug program, which I never requested. So the institute I was at was going to make it an incentive camp, you know, well, the dorm I was in was 2 stories, and they were going to make the whole dorm a game room.
Right.
Well, they realized they couldn't utilize upstairs as a game room because of the inmates that had disability. So they cleared out the bottom. I moved up top, and the new bunkie he's like, you'd like to hang out? I'm like, hell yeah, but I'm in this tier 1, tier 2 drug program, and they're doing the piss test 2 or 3 times a week, 4 times a week. So long story short, I ended up getting out of that program, and then it was game on, man. We had such a good time down there with you. Shout out to you, KC, if you're happen to watch this. My old bunkie down here in South Florida. You know, it's hang out, have a good time, you know.
It's basically, you know, I don't think that some of our fans out here or people that are watching maybe for the first time, I don't think they realize that what you can get in the street, you can still get in prison.
Yep.
It's still going to come in, either through old ladies or COs or civilians that work at the prison. It's going to come in because money talks. I mean, you hit it on the head when you said money talks.
Yeah, if you've got money, money talks, bullshit walks. You know. And there's a lot of guys that didn't make it 18 years. One guy had 3 years. He had about 8 to 10 months left. There was an incident at one of the institutes. I won't get into it. He had told the dude to steal a couple things from this individual. The individual was in prison with a life sentence. Well, the individual found out who stole it, but he also knew somebody had told him to steal it.
Right.
So the dude stepped to him and said, look, I'm going to let you slide. Tell me who told you to steal it, my shit. So the guy found out apparently who he was and what he was in prison for. So he gave the dude's name up. And like I said, he had only like a 3-year sentence and he had 8 to 10 months left on it. Well, unfortunately, the other individual handled his business, and unfortunately, he never went home. He went home in a pine box. A lot of that in prison, you know, it's about the respect. That was the biggest thing in prison because being affiliated with all the different gangs, you know, the jitterbugs are scoring a lot of things up too in prison because they're getting 35 to life and they're just doing the cutthroat thing. And a lot of the OGs and the old school guys are like, you know, so.
So because of preferential treatment as far as food and everything else goes, is that one of the biggest reasons that a lot of people convert and become Muslim? Because they do get special treatment.
Due to their religion, they have their, like Ramadan, they don't really get anything special. I mean, during Ramadan, they cannot eat during daylight hours, I believe.
Right.
In one institute, they were giving them bag lunches, like 2 bologna sandwiches, a peanut butter sandwich, an orange, and like either a cake or a cookie that was made in the chow hall. So
for dietary reasons, because of the religion?
Well, about 5 years before they came out with what's known as the RDP, or Religious Diet Program. And that was basically the Jewish community and the Muslim community that had fought, along with there were some individuals that were Buddhists in prison, but they ended up making it for all the religions.
Right.
And they found out they were actually pretty good. We got like little TV dinners. When I first had my incident, got transferred after jumping on one of the officers because I was over medicated. I had started at the institute, and they were giving out the little TV dinners. And by the time I got transferred out west to the slab, they were giving us a cup of beans and a cup of cabbage because it boiled down to the dollar. It was, $8 to $10 a day per inmate. And everybody's getting on this RDP. So the last 5 years I had eaten the RDP. An acquaintance that I met while I was incarcerated back early on, he's like, hey man, come up and check out our service. I'm like, what's up? He's like, dude, I've been studying Buddhism for several years. So I went up there and checked it out. And I was like, the more I read, the more it clicked with me. Because it's just the simplicity of it. At one point I was a chaplain's clerk, so I had to have knowledge of all the religions to set up the various events through the year. But it all boils down to two things. All religions are pretty much the same. They just have different titles. It all boils down to two things: love and compassion. If you have knowledge and understand those religions. So I had started studying Buddhism. We had a yoga class for about a year at one of the institutes also, which was really cool. So I had gotten into that, and then for some reason or another, they discontinued the yoga program.
You're too big for fucking yoga, dude. You're a big
Right.
motherfucker.
Some
You
of
have a
those
goat? You have a
positions-
goat on your back? Something when you were over there, or what?
Some of those positions weren't happening. So, the down dog and some of the others.
Are you still studying?
No,
Buddhism?
not now. I tried to do the program down at the VA,
Yeah.
but at the time I didn't have a whip, a vehicle, and I was having to take the bus to and from the VA. And, for an hour, it just wasn't worth it to spend 3 hours on the bus.
No, I got you.
Yeah.
So, I know that what I'm going to ask you is the fact anyway, but some of the people out here watching may be interested. What's your life expectancy or your physical expectancy if you go in as a child sex crimes?
Oh, you're referring to what we call as a chomo. For those that don't know what a chomo is, it's a pedophile. And
Child molester, aka chomo.
correct, Mike. So they didn't fare too well. I'm not getting into it, but they either checked in or they got life flighted and then transferred to another institute once they got out of the hospital.
I mean, let's face it. As inmates, there's a pecking order, correct?
Correct.
And, I guess, talking to some guys in the federal prison on some organized crime cases that I was working, depending on the type of crimes and your stature in the system, and then naturally, when you're talking about a pedophile, which is at the lowest of the totem pole, I think it's a good thing. So don't get me fucking wrong. I kind of dig it. So just to be fucking honest with you, I kind of dig it. But I know that there are many small gangs, and I know the larger ones that are prevalent in the. One thing that interests me, not only from here, But when I was assigned in the Miami days and stuff during that whole Cuban Mario boat lift and stuff, and the tattoo system, and started studying on some of the Russian prisons, and I mean, you were in Japan as well. I mean, somebody's life can be portrayed in the tattooing they had, and I'm sure I've seen some artwork come out of prison that was just, you say to yourself, Jesus Christ, you're wasting your time when they're so talented as artists. Have you come across some like really impeccable fucking ink slingers while you were in?
There was some guys that were phenomenal. There was one guy at one institute. I was going to have him do some work on me, and I walked in, and he's like, "Hey, when we doing your slinging your ink?" And I'm like, "No, I'm good." He's like, "What's up?" And the guy's got no gloves on. He's just, a lot of guys use precaution. They were sterile. They got a hold of bleach.
Right.
They got a hold of the gloves. They made sure the needles were clean and everything. But yeah, the tattooing, there was a couple of organizations where some guys were selling patches, and that didn't go over too good. So they had two choices. They take them off, ink them out, or they were being taken off forcefully. So,
tell them what a patch. I know what it is naturally, but tell them what a patch is.
Depending on, it can be anywhere from a white supremacist group to one of the other gangs, either Latin gangs, the Bloods, the Crips, whatever. It's their identification. Basically, they get tattooed once they get into the gang, and there's several ways in. I won't get into that, but like I said, there was a couple of organizations, guys were selling patches. It didn't go well for either the guys selling the patches or the guys that were buying them. So
you hook up with a guy who's tattooing, and naturally everything costs. So is it cash in their account? Is it trade? How does that work?
You can do wire transfer. You can do it off your card with a canteen. You can do it with drugs. Either way, canteen, drugs, or wire transfer with the cash.
Right. And COs didn't fuck with them. COs didn't fuck with them tattooing.
Some institutes, the officers really didn't care because even though it was against the rules and regulations, it kept us out of trouble.
Yeah.
To a degree, you know what I'm saying? So, and some of the state workers were actually bringing in real tattooing, and I've also heard rumors that they brought in real tattoo guns to a couple of the institutes.
I've seen quite a few homemade ones, but
I can't confirm that. It's just a rumor that I heard.
Did they run it off of
Now, the homemade tattoo guns, they sell electrical razors in the canteen. So you pick one of those up, guitar strings, the springs and the staplers.
Yeah.
They would straighten out, heat them up, and use the needles for the tattoo guns. So it's not that hard. You set up a battery pack. And
pretty interesting.
Some of the work, like I said, was really good. And then I've seen some work.
I've seen some. Naturally, it was in a federal institute, but I met. He was like a famous tattoo artist within the prison, and I seen some of his shit, and I was like, this guy would be making fucking bank if he wasn't in prison. But then again, he laughed when I said that to him, and he goes, "Oh no, I'm banking here." So, I get it,
Well, a couple of guys I knew that slang bank, didn't have 20, 30 years. They only had a short sentence, like 5 to 8 years.
Right.
And they were so good, they were talking about opening up their own shop when they got out. They'd have to go get their license through the state. things like that. But two of the guys I know did get out and open their own shop. One was in South Carolina. I think the other guy was here in Florida. I can't remember exactly, but you know, you don't get any money in prison. You got to hustle, have a little bit something in it, the locker room. 10 o'clock at night, your stomach's hitting your backbone, and
Yep.
you know.
What, not naming a location or an incident of the violence, is there one incident in particular that stands out the most?
One of the institutes, we had the one incident with the one inmate that only had a 3-year sentence,
Right.
That ended up going home in a pine box. One of the other serious incidences I saw was over a boot or a jack, which is another name for a cell phone, which is contraband in the institutes. And they bumped for a good 30 minutes. I mean, there was blood all over the back of the dorm. The officers just hanging out in the officer station. I mean, one dude had a broomstick. Dude got hit in the head with a broomstick, split his shit from his ear all the way down. But I didn't go out to rec. There were some incidences out on the rec yard.
Right.
I only went out if I had to go to canteen or, like one of the institutes I was at, we had softball over the summer during third guard. That was the big thing at the institute. Everybody went out there hanging out. Guys were smoking reefer, drinking the hooch, having a good time, talking smack. Just went out there and had a good time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get that you have to make the time pass. I mean, a week, 18 years, you still got to make time pass. I mean, I absolutely get it.
Well, in prison, like they say on the streets, a dog is a man's best friend. In prison, it's a book. I got into reading. I read quite a bit. Stayed away from politics and religion, except, like I was saying, I was studying Buddhism.
Right.
And, but, I pretty much I read what I could get my hands on. The institutes have inmate libraries. They've got periodicals in there with various magazines, from auto to fishing. A lot of the books are donated. They're not in the best condition. We had one institute. There was a bunch of guys that got books sent in. So after we passed them around on the north side, we shot them over to the south side. And the south side would shoot their stuff over to the north side. And then after that, we donated, because you are only allowed to have, per DOC guidelines, 4 books. So if you were having books sent in, sometimes you go up there and say, hey, look, I'm going to donate these to the inmate library, and they give you your other 4 books. So,
It was definitely
challenging.
Yeah,
it was challenging. But it's, like I said early on, it's on how you carry yourself, and it's all about the respect.
Well, you're here. You did your 18.
Yes.
You got your respect in there. You turn your life around. One thing is interesting that I don't think that I had mentioned when I knew Gator those years back prior to that evening, and he was doing prisoner transport and extradition for contractors. He had spoken about, I remember having a conversation, believe it or not, it came back to me, about going into law enforcement. So when you look at the things that change in your life and the past, or I should say paths that people choose or are forced into, or whatever the circumstances are, that leads you to now. See, my whole thing is you got to make memories. You can collect as many real property and cars and bikes and houses, but you got to make memories, because when it's time to go the only thing you can rely on in those last flickering moments are the memories that you made in life.
I do remember that conversation. I think it was you and one of the other sergeants with the department you were with at the time. We were talking about a sponsorship.
We were.
Yeah, I remember
We
that
were.
now.
So when we got together, we're having coffee, and he brings up the point about it didn't sit well with me or him. And one of the things that didn't sit well with me was at the time, because we do what we have to do. Case goes to court after it's presented, and after that, we do this with our hands. Whatever happens to the individual that's arrested and sentences, that's it. We move on to another case. But one of the things that didn't sit well was having conversations with him, running into him while he was working doing the prisoner transport, and then what led up to that night, and it was fucking chaotic. I'm going to tell you right now, it was chaotic. I'm not going to pull any punches. And I always wondered what the fuck happened between talking to him not long before that incident. So yeah, when I said to him, it didn't sit right, man, because I couldn't figure out what the fuck transpired or what the trigger was. Now, if anybody ever tells you that you don't have a trigger and you can't be pushed to do anything, and I had this conversation with some friends of mine not too long ago who are not in law enforcement, and I simply said anybody could be. Now, this has nothing to do with Gator, so please get nothing to do with him. This is just me speaking with you all. So I said to these people, so let me pose you something. I said, anybody can commit murder. No. There's a big argument going back and forth about can never happen. So I had to bring up some scenarios because everybody has a trigger. There have been people of the cloth who have a trigger, and the most calm people you ever want to know in your life that have triggers. It depends on what that trigger is. Anyway, getting back to what I was originally saying was, I guess it was unsettling because, we cut up and spoke about life and shit. You were a young man. How old were you when that happened?
I think it was like 25, maybe 26.
All right, so he was a fucking kid when this happened, and had his whole life in front of him, and his path that he wanted to take. Naturally, this wasn't in the equation, and that's what didn't sit well, and that's what Gator and I spoke about at length. And I understand. Still told him he was fucking wrong. Still told him he deserved what he got. But I understand the fact. Yes, and I understand the factors that led him to that point. And yes, that area doesn't sit well. That being said, I can tell you that the man sitting here now, and after spending some time with Gator and reconnecting, is really like the guy that I knew when he was 25, which I find very cool. We're going to continue to have coffee. We're going to continue to go and get some oysters and some drinks and do some fishing, which I think is cool. So when you think that people on the opposite side of the fence will never, ever, ever come together and talk and be friends, I'm here to tell you that that's a fallacy. And for whatever reason, whatever outside forces you believe in, reconnected Gator and I through Mike. And it's funny because when Gator sent over the drinks that night, and I was told the name, and I said, fuck, I know that name. And I couldn't place it because it's been 23 fucking years. So I finally said to Mike, I said, where's he at? He pointed. I said, Jesus Christ. So, I walked over and started talking to him. Enough on philosophy, enough being said. I do have a favor of our fans out there, and or for anybody who's watching this episode. Gator is trying to get a service dog for his illness, and they don't come cheap. They're all waiting lists. If anybody out there knows or can connect us with the service to get a service dog for Gator, I would be deeply appreciative. You can hit us up on here. No problem, man. You can hit us up on here. If you have any information, I'll relay it to Gator. If you got any questions for him, hit us up in the inbox. You know, Mike and I see him all the time, and I'll relay it, and I'll answer your questions. And through Gator, I'll ask Gator. And, you know, if you want Gator back on and we decide that we can dwell a little bit more into his prison life. Now, we had an agreement that we weren't going to get into a lot of things. This is the first time he's speaking about this, and especially the social media. So as we speak down the line, he may open up a little bit more, and we may ask him if he's willing to come back on the podcast. But again, please.
Definitely.
Cool, man. We'd appreciate that. But I would absolutely appreciate your help, guys. If you can get a service dog or know somebody who's willing to help out the show, hit us up on Gangsters and Cigars, and I can let Gator know as well.
I appreciate that, Bobby. You know.
That being said, man, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you for being that guy again.
Trials and tribulations that life throws at you. You know, I got out of prison. I held my head up high because I made it 18 years. But whatever the trials and tribulations that life throws at you, never look back, but never forget where you've been.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So, like I said, I appreciate you guys having me on the show. I enjoyed it, chopping it up with you. It was good reconnecting with you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, man. It absolutely was. We'll do it again.
Most definitely.
And hit the like button, people.
Hit that subscribe button, guys. Leave comments.
Leave comments, please.
Feel right easy.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks again. Thanks for always watching the show. Thanks again to our sponsors, Lewis Smoke Rings, Bully at Bullies Tattoos, and Tommy Law over at the circus in
Rock and Roll Circus
in St. Augustine. So like I always say and like I always end it, you could either be seated at the table
or you could be on the menu.
God bless.
Till
Have a
next
good
time.
night. Till
Cheers.
next time. Cheers.